was Andrew Carnegie, and if you don't know his story, he grew up in Dunfermline, Scotland. He was a very poor boy. His dad was a handloom weaver, and they made like the equivalent of like £10 a week or something, ridiculously low, which they had to live off of. And so his mother started supplementing by selling sweet treats in a sweetie shop, and selling kind of meats. I imagine pasties and sort of things like that. What ended up happening was, they ended up, his dad was made redundant because of the industrial change at the time. There was this industrialization of Britain, and they ended up going over to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Andrew Carnegie was very young at the time. I believe he was around 12 years old when they moved, and he and his dad both got jobs at a kind of like a factory somewhere. I believe it was steel factory, but it might have been something else. His dad basically spends a few months there working, and then decides to go back to weaving, which is his craft. And suddenly his dad's not the main breadwinner anymore, and it's up to his mum, who is like making shoes and selling sweets and stuff. And Andrew takes this job, and he does well. There's another Scottish guy at the factory who kind of gives him a leg up. I believe his name was John Hayes, and he does really well. He gets promoted, and then he starts working with, gets invited to work for the Ohio Telegram Company. So he's going around Pittsburgh delivering all these letters to all these people, and he's memorizing their office addresses, the faces of the business owners there. So that's really who you want to be dealing with in business later. And he's very excited, and he does all this stuff, and eventually he gets involved with the railroads, and so he's in charge of the telegram or telegraph system on the railroads, right? As he does this, he gets promoted, I think, another 2 or 3 times, and works his way up. Eventually, he becomes involved in the steel business. He invented the Bessemer process, which is a process where you burn off the high carbon content of pig iron, and this makes it much cheaper to produce, and it was used in the railroad tracks, so they use a lot of iron for those railroads. And it's not really used in architecture or like bridges, because it's not as durable, but it allows for cheaper steel process and manufacturing. So he took that Bessemer process, and then he started investing in the railroad system and some sleeper cars. He eventually works his way up to selling his steel company, and he was richer at that time. He was the richest man alive, bigger than the Rockefellers, so bigger than John D. Rockefeller. And he ended up giving out like 350 million to arts and to museums all over. You have the Carnegie Hall right in New York City, and you have a ton of statues and like libraries and museums as well in Scotland, actually, that comes from this guy around Dunfermline. And I've been to Dunfermline quite a few times. I've seen some of the stuff, and I find it very funny that the school that Andrew Carnegie grew up in was a free school. And if you don't know this, Scotland is one of the first places that did this, right? They did free schooling, the first country on the world to do it, and that was paid for by a philanthropist. And that philanthropist obviously made a big impact in Andrew's life, and sponsored that school that he grew up in as a young boy. So in return, Andrew pays it forward, and I believe that the best possible outcome of society's decline right now is that people will appear like Andrew Carnegie. They will appear like these guys who just realize they've got to do it. They've got to take their own actions, and not be dismayed by this industrial change with AI and with this new step up to computers. It's similar to the industrialization, the great industrialization that happened with the factories, and with the that it was like 70% of the workforce was laid off or something ridiculous. The majority of the workforce had to change jobs. They were made redundant. All these craftsmen, cobblers, farmers, weavers, like Andrew's dad, suddenly replaced by cheap labor, from the Orient, from the East, and these factories that would import in bulk product to then change. So I mean, it's happened before, it will happen again, and the new age of AI and computers, it is important to be aware of that. People are very afraid. They're very afraid of this coming change, and I've seen companies. There's one in London that just laid off like 6,000 workers, I believe, or was it 600? Yeah, sorry, I think he had 700 workers in total, and he laid off 600 of them, entry level like analysts and stuff like that, because they were just made redundant by AI processes. So the next stage might be interesting. I think there will be a huge influx of people into physical, like the new bottleneck. The bottleneck used to be software products and programs. That used to be like the key part of a business, and I think the new key part of the business is now going to be the physical parts. So physical, the actual metal gears and parts, data centers. Obviously, you have private equity going into HVAC, plumbing, electricity, and BlackRock actually launched like $100 million fund last week to invest in like trades. So trades are now becoming hot. There's going to be thousands and thousands of people pouring into the trades like plumbing and electricians. So we'll see what that brings. I'm very curious and I'm very excited. I'm fascinated by the best possible outcome, and I think it'll be great. And yeah, don't be too worried about things outside your control. Just work on stuff you can control. So we'll see what happens.